I still remember that shattering moment as if it were a scene from a vivid nightmare, when my wife, with tears glistening in her eyes, simply said, "I need time alone." Those first 100 words rang in my ears like a death knell, a promise of separation that cut deeper than any sword. In that instant, I felt as though the very ground beneath me had crumbled, and I was forced to confront a truth I'd never dared to imagine. She wanted a lifetime without me. The cold finality in her voice ignited a fierce determination within me, one that would eventually lead me to redefine not only our future but also my very identity. I spent the first few days in a daze, wandering through our once shared home as if it were haunted by echoes of our happier past. Every room, every corner, whispered memories of laughter and dreams now abandoned. At work, I found my focus shattered by an overwhelming mix of sorrow and disbelief. Colleagues offered sympathetic glances, but nothing could fill the void that her words had created. I questioned every moment we had ever spent together, wondering how our love had deteriorated into a plea for solitude. In my solitude, I started to trace back the subtle signals I had missed: a fleeting sigh during dinner, a distant look in her eyes, hints that maybe she was struggling with a world she could no longer share with me. Yet, amid the heartache, something unexpected stirred. I began to wonder if perhaps her request was not about needing physical space, but a desperate bid to reclaim her identity, a freedom from the weight of our shared past. For nights on end, I lay awake, my mind a torrent of conflicting thoughts. I could feel the sting of rejection, yet also a spark of determination. If she needed time alone, maybe it was time for me too to rediscover who I was when stripped of the roles I'd long assumed. I dusted off old journals and notebooks, reading the words I'd once written with hopeful ambition. The dreams I'd jotted down, the ones of adventure, of learning, of exploring the world, began to beckon me again. Slowly I made a decision. I wouldn't beg her to return, nor would I allow her need for isolation to imprison me in a life of misery. Instead, I resolved to give her what she said she needed: a lifetime without me. Not out of spite, but as an act of self-preservation and renewal. I began by reclaiming my mornings. At dawn, I would lace up my sneakers and set out for long runs along the quiet city streets. Each step on the pavement was a meditative act, a way to release the sorrow and to remind myself that I was still here, still capable of moving forward, even if she had chosen a different path. I also returned to hobbies that I had long neglected. I rediscovered the solace of reading and the creative escape of writing. I started a journal where I documented every small victory and every painful setback. In those pages, I poured out my heart, the ache of abandonment, the memories of shared laughter now turned bittersweet, and the slow, steady reawakening of my own dreams. I even reconnected with old friends who reminded me of who I was before I lost myself in our relationship. Their support, along with the realization that I deserved to be valued for my true self, slowly began to mend the fissures in my spirit. At work, I channeled my grief into a newfound drive. I sought out challenging projects, eager to prove that my abilities were not diminished by the loss I'd suffered. Late nights at the office became my sanctuary, where every completed task and every successful meeting was a small act of defiance against the pain. I realized that while she had chosen solitude for herself, I could choose to embrace the world and all its possibilities. I began setting ambitious goals, not to impress anyone else, but to honor the part of me that had been neglected for too long. As weeks turned into months, I slowly began to see the silver linings emerging from the storm of loss. I enrolled in courses to enhance my skills and even started exploring new career opportunities that I had always been too afraid to consider. I traveled to new cities for conferences and met with mentors who inspired me to think bigger and bolder. Every experience, every challenge contributed to the rebuilding of my identity brick by brick. I found that I was not defined by my wife's desire for time alone. I was defined by the choices I made to reclaim my life and pursue my passions. The more I immersed myself in these pursuits, the more I discovered that solitude could be both a curse and a blessing. In the quiet of my own company, I began to understand that my self-worth was not tethered to another's approval. I learned to appreciate my own company, to savor a meal, enjoy a movie, and even relish the silence that once felt so oppressive. I took long, reflective walks in the park, and in the solitude of nature, I found that my heart, though bruised, was still capable of great joy and deep compassion. Yet, as I continued on this path of self-rediscovery, there were moments when the old pain would surge unexpectedly. A familiar song on the radio, a snippet of conversation, or even a fleeting glimpse of her face in a crowd. Those moments, though painful, no longer crippled me. Instead, they served as reminders of how far I had come and of the strength I had cultivated along the way. I realized that giving her a lifetime without me was not a punishment for her, but a gift for myself. A chance to step out of the shadow of a relationship that no longer served me and to create a future that was solely my own. One crisp autumn evening, as I sat at a small cafe savoring a quiet dinner, I met someone who would soon change the course of my life. Our conversation started casually, discussing books, travel, and our mutual love for quiet moments, but it quickly deepened into an exchange of dreams and personal journeys. In her eyes, I saw a reflection of the resilience I was beginning to embody, and in her laughter, I found a spark of hope. Over the following weeks, we met frequently, each encounter gently chipping away at the remnants of loneliness and self-doubt. Her presence, kind and sincere, was a balm to my wounded heart, and together, we explored the possibility of a future built not on the ashes of past pain, but on the promise of new beginnings. In retrospect, I realized that her declaration for time alone was the catalyst I needed to embark on this transformative journey. It forced me to face the harsh realities of a love that had diminished my self-worth, and it compelled me to rebuild my life with integrity and courage. My wife's choice to isolate herself was not a reflection of my inadequacy, but a revelation that our paths had irrevocably diverged. By giving her the space she demanded, a lifetime without me, I found the freedom to rediscover who I was and to embrace a future defined by my own aspirations. Now, as I continue to rebuild my world, I am filled with a quiet sense of triumph and renewal. I am no longer the man who lived in the shadow of another's insecurities. I am a man who has reclaimed his identity, who has learned to love his solitude, and who is now ready to build a future that resonates with the true essence of who I am. My journey is far from over, but each step forward reinforces a profound truth, that the only person who can define your worth is you, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is to let go, both for yourself and for the other person. In the aftermath of that painful night when she stole my business idea and mocked me in front of everyone, I threw myself into an all-consuming quest for redemption. Every morning I woke up with a resolve forged in fire. The sting of her laughter, echoing in my ears like a relentless refrain, drove me to reassemble the shattered fragments of my concept. I spent countless hours in my small home office, rereading every note, every sketch, and every half-formed plan that I had once nurtured with so much hope. I was determined to rebuild the idea in its purest form, untarnished by her betrayal, a vision that would not only prove my worth but also serve as a monument to my resilience. The days blended into long nights filled with brainstorming sessions, market research, and iterations on the original concept. I dove into every resource I could find, books on startups, industry journals, and online courses, to refine my business model. Every setback was a lesson. I encountered technical challenges that made my prototype fail repeatedly, and each time I meticulously analyzed what went wrong, adjusting my approach with painstaking detail. My determination became a constant companion. I began to see every failure not as a defeat, but as a stepping stone toward something greater. I was no longer content to simply nurse my wounded pride. I was fueled by an intense need to prove that my vision was unstoppable. I reached out to a few old friends and trusted former colleagues who had always believed in my capabilities. Their encouragement was both uplifting and grounding. Together we formed a small but dedicated team. We spent days huddled in cramped conference rooms at local cafes, scribbling ideas on napkins, whiteboards, and any scrap of paper we could find. We debated fiercely, experimented relentlessly, and slowly the idea began to morph into a viable business plan. Every brainstorming session became a cathartic release, a way to channel the raw anger of betrayal into constructive energy. I realized that our collective passion was a potent antidote to the bitterness that once threatened to drown me. As our work progressed, I started approaching potential investors. I was nervous. After all, every pitch was a reminder of the moment when my idea had been stolen and ridiculed. But with each presentation I grew more confident. I learned to articulate my vision with a clarity that surprised even me. I explained how the original concept had been undermined by betrayal, but that I had rebuilt it stronger and more resilient than before. I showcased our prototypes, detailed our market research, and projected ambitious, yet achievable, growth figures. Some investors were skeptical at first, their eyes narrowing as if trying to read the truth behind my words, but gradually my passion and conviction began to win them over. Every nod of approval, every handshake after a successful pitch, was a quiet triumph, a signal that I was reclaiming not just my idea but my self-worth. During this time, my inner life was a tempest of emotions. There were moments when I would sit alone, staring at the blank pages of my journal, and feel the raw sting of her betrayal all over again. The memory of her mocking tone would creep in during the silence of midnight, and I'd find myself battling waves of anger and sorrow. Yet, in those moments, I also discovered an inner reservoir of strength I hadn't known existed. I learned to face the pain head-on, to transform the hurt into a driving force that propelled me forward. I would remind myself, this is your future, don't let her words define you. Slowly, the pain began to fade, replaced by a fierce determination to build something that would stand as a testament to my perseverance. I also began to experiment with creative ways to promote our emerging product. I started a modest website, detailing our journey from inception to implementation, a narrative that was as much about overcoming adversity as it was about the innovation itself. I poured my heart into every blog post, sharing the behind-the-scenes struggles, the breakthroughs, and even the moments of despair that had ultimately led to our progress. The response was surprisingly positive. Strangers left comments filled with empathy and encouragement, many of them confessing that my story gave them hope. In that digital dialogue, I found validation not in the approval of my ex-wife, but in the collective resilience of a community that understood what it meant to rise from the ashes. Amid these professional strides, I made it a point to nurture my personal growth. I sought therapy to help process the emotional aftermath of the betrayal. In those sessions, I learned to disentangle my self-worth from the opinions and actions of others. I discovered that the pain, as excruciating as it was, had awakened a dormant part of me, an inner strength that could not be diminished by someone's scornful words. Therapy taught me that forgiveness is not about forgetting, but about freeing yourself from the chains of bitterness. I gradually learned to forgive her, not for her sake, but so I could move forward unencumbered by the past. With every session, I emerged a little more whole, a little more certain that I was on the right path. Even as my business began to gain traction, I made sure to celebrate the small victories along the way. I organized informal gatherings with my team, where we'd toast to each new milestone, each new investor meeting that went well, each prototype that passed testing, and each piece of positive feedback from early adopters. These moments, though modest, served as powerful reminders that I was not defined by her rejection. I was defined by my ability to adapt, to overcome, and to transform heartbreak into a foundation for success. As our startup grew, I faced numerous challenges that tested every ounce of my resolve. There were days when technical glitches or unexpected market shifts threatened to derail our progress. I vividly remember a particularly grueling week when a major supplier unexpectedly fell through, sending our production timeline into chaos. In the midst of that crisis, I rallied my team. We worked around the clock to secure alternative arrangements, and through sleepless nights and countless phone calls, we managed to stabilize the situation. That ordeal, while exhausting, cemented our bond as a team and reinforced my belief that no setback was insurmountable. I began to view every obstacle as an opportunity to innovate, to find creative solutions that not only resolved the issue but also improved our overall strategy. I also encountered moments of personal introspection during this period, times when the weight of the betrayal would momentarily resurface, threatening to cloud my progress. On such nights, I would take long, solitary walks under a blanket of stars, the cool air and quiet streets offering solace. I'd reflect on how far I had come, recalling the early days of despair and comparing them to the steady momentum I had built over time. In those reflective moments, I found that my heart was gradually healing, each step a silent victory over the past. The pain was still there like a faint scar, but it no longer dictated my every thought or action. The process of building my startup was, in many ways, a journey of self-discovery. I learned not only about business and innovation but about the depths of my own resilience. I discovered that the betrayal that had once shattered me was also the catalyst for an awakening, a call to recognize that my ideas, my dreams, and my potential were far greater than the sum of someone else's dismissals. Every setback became a lesson, every success a testament to the power of perseverance. I began to document these lessons, not just in my journal but also in a series of blog posts that resonated with a growing audience of aspiring entrepreneurs. The more I shared, the more I realized that my struggle was universal, a narrative of overcoming obstacles and emerging stronger on the other side. By the end of this tumultuous phase, I had not only re-established my business idea but had set it on a path to success. The initial sting of betrayal had been transformed into the fuel that drove my ambition. I began receiving inquiries from potential investors who were impressed by the progress we'd made, and the concept that once seemed fragile now held the promise of revolutionizing our industry. Every email, every meeting, and every handshake was a reminder that I had reclaimed my power and that my vision was undeniable. In essence, those months were a crucible of transformation, a period where every challenge, every setback, and every triumph contributed to the rebirth of my identity. I had taken the raw, searing pain of betrayal and channeled it into a relentless pursuit of excellence. I learned that the true measure of success isn't the absence of failure, but the courage to rise each time you fall. And in doing so, I forged a new future, one where the mockery of the past was nothing more than a distant echo, replaced by the vibrant pulse of innovation and self-belief. I reached the pinnacle of my journey on a crisp, clear morning that felt like the culmination of every sacrifice and every sleepless night. Standing before a mirror in my new office, a sleek, modern space that I'd designed with care, I took a long, hard look at the person I had become. The reflection that stared back at me was not the man who once crumbled under the weight of betrayal and derision. It was someone transformed by adversity, someone whose eyes held the quiet fire of hard-won confidence. Every line on my face, every mark of stress and triumph, testified to the relentless battles I had fought, and now, every moment of that struggle had forged a future that I proudly called my own. It wasn't just a personal victory, it was a triumph for everything I had built. My business, once my stolen idea and the source of public mockery, had now evolved into a thriving venture. The prototype that had once been dismissed and ridiculed was now a market-disrupting innovation, embraced by investors and celebrated by customers alike. The company I had resurrected with such fierce determination was growing steadily, with new partnerships, enthusiastic team members, and an unmistakable buzz in the industry. Every press release, every favorable review, and every congratulatory email reaffirmed that the spark ignited by betrayal had transformed into a roaring blaze of success. I remember the day we launched our official product version. It felt like a rebirth. We held a modest launch event in a renovated space that we now called our Creative Hub. As I addressed the audience, my voice steady and my gaze unwavering, I recounted the challenges we'd faced. I spoke of setbacks that threatened to shatter our progress, of nights spent with only the hum of the computer and my racing thoughts as companions, and of the bitter taste of betrayal that had spurred me to rebuild. I explained how the very act of having my idea stolen became the fuel that drove me to innovate, to refine, and to ultimately succeed. The room erupted in applause, not merely as a gesture of politeness, but as an earnest, affirming recognition of a journey from despair to excellence. In that moment, I knew that the woman who had once mocked me was now forced to confront the reality of my achievements. I learned later, through whispers and shared recollections at industry gatherings, that she had watched the launch with a mixture of disbelief and regret. It wasn't that she wanted to see my success for my sake. Rather, it was the stark irony of fate that left her grappling with the consequences of her own choices. I never allowed her presence, or absence, to sway me. Instead, I had built my success on the foundation of my own resilience, and that foundation was unshakable. Every day as our business continued to grow, I saw the transformation of my former pain into enduring power. I had expanded our operations into new markets, recruited a team of bright and driven individuals, and even explored innovative avenues that I had never dared to consider before. My days became a blend of strategic meetings, creative brainstorming sessions, and long, thoughtful walks that allowed me to reflect on how far I'd come. I began to understand that success wasn't about erasing the past, it was about using every scar, every moment of doubt, as a reminder of the strength I had developed. I also found that sharing my story brought unexpected rewards. I was invited to speak at entrepreneurial forums and conferences, where I recounted my journey with raw honesty and vulnerability. In these moments, I saw faces light up with recognition, people who had experienced their own betrayals and failures, who found in my narrative a spark of hope that they too could rise above their challenges. I wasn't just an entrepreneur, I had become a mentor, a beacon of possibility for those who felt crushed by their own setbacks. Each conversation, each heartfelt message from someone inspired by my story, reinforced my belief that the pain of betrayal could be transmuted into a force for change, a force that not only rebuilt me but also empowered others to reclaim their lives. In the quiet moments before sleep, I often replayed the past in my mind. I remembered the day of that fateful birthday party when my wife had toasted to an exciting future without me. I recalled the bitter taste of humiliation, the disbelief that had gripped me, and the long, dark nights that followed. But those memories, once so raw and painful, had become distant echoes, reminders of a time that had propelled me to look inward and find my true strength. I realized that every tear, every moment of self-doubt, had been a necessary step on my journey to this point of self-discovery and empowerment. I began to embrace my solitude as a gift. I learned to love the quiet mornings where the only sound was the whisper of the wind and my own steady breathing, a symbol of the peace that comes from accepting yourself, flaws and all. I started exploring meditation and mindfulness, practices that helped me ground my thoughts and remain centered amid the chaos of daily challenges. I discovered that being alone did not mean being lonely, it meant having the space to nurture your dreams and to rebuild your world from the inside out. My journey also led me to revisit relationships that had always been supportive but had been overshadowed by the turmoil of our failed marriage. I reconnected with old friends, people who had always seen the real me even when I had doubted myself. Their unwavering support was like a warm embrace in the coldest of times. I also forged new friendships with individuals whose energy was positive and whose outlook on life was unburdened by cynicism. Through these interactions, I learned that the quality of your relationships is determined not by the quantity of people around you, but by the authenticity of the connections you build. As my personal and professional lives converged, I started to envision a future where every challenge I had faced would serve as a stepping stone to even greater achievements. I set my sights on ambitious goals, expanding the business into international markets, launching new products that would revolutionize our industry, and ultimately writing a book about my journey, a raw, unfiltered account of turning betrayal into empowerment. I began drafting outlines and chapters, eager to share my story with a wider audience, not as a tale of revenge, but as a narrative of resilience, reinvention, and the relentless pursuit of one's dreams. The turning point, I realized, was not a single moment but a series of small, persistent acts of courage. Every time I chose to rise above the hurt, every time I put forth my best effort despite the lingering shadows of the past, I was rewriting the narrative of my life. I no longer defined myself by the hurtful words once spewed by someone who had underestimated me. Instead, I measured my worth by my ability to overcome, to create, and to inspire, not just myself but everyone who had ever felt the sting of betrayal. In a culminating moment of clarity, I organized a celebration, a small, intimate gathering of friends, family, and trusted colleagues, to mark the official launch of our new product line. The event was held in a beautifully renovated loft, filled with the soft glow of ambient lighting and the gentle hum of joyful conversation. As I stood before the assembled crowd, I spoke with heartfelt emotion about the journey that had brought me to this moment. I recounted the nights of doubt, the relentless work, and the quiet victories that had built my comeback. The applause that followed was not just a gesture of congratulation, it was an affirmation that I had transformed pain into power. That evening, as I looked around at the smiling faces and felt the warmth of genuine support, I realized that I had truly reclaimed my life. I had taken a stolen idea, mocked and diminished by betrayal, and turned it into a thriving venture, a testament to the indomitable spirit that resides within every person. I had proven that the measure of success is not how others perceive you, but how you persevere in the face of adversity. My ex-wife's scorn, once a source of searing pain, had become nothing more than a distant memory, a catalyst for change that had propelled me to build a future beyond what I had ever imagined. Now, as I stand on the threshold of new opportunities and look forward to a future filled with promise, I carry with me the lessons of every setback and every victory. I have learned that every ending, no matter how painful, is the beginning of a new chapter. I embrace the uncertainty of the future with excitement rather than fear, knowing that I have the strength to meet whatever challenges come my way. My journey has taught me that true empowerment comes from within, that forgiveness and self-belief are the keys to unlocking a life of joy and fulfillment. This is my story, a journey from betrayal and humiliation to triumph and self-reclamation. I have transformed the pain of being undermined into a legacy of innovation, resilience, and unwavering self-worth. Every laugh that once mocked me, every dismissive word that once tried to hold me back, has been converted into the fuel for my success. And as I step confidently into the future, I do so knowing that my worth is not defined by the actions of others but by the relentless, courageous pursuit of my own dreams. I now live a life filled with purpose and passion, a life that I built from the ashes of heartbreak and transformed with the power of perseverance. My business thrives, my relationships are rich with authenticity, and my heart, once burdened by betrayal, now beats with a steady, unbreakable rhythm of hope and promise. I am no longer the man who was diminished by the cruelty of others. I am the man who rose from the depths and built something extraordinary. And as I continue to write the chapters of my life, I do so with gratitude, strength, and the firm belief that every ending is merely the beginning of a new, remarkable journey.